All right, welcome to Gateway API meeting for May 23. We've got a few things on the agenda today. Just as always, this is a very informal meeting. Feel free to ask questions, make comments, add things to the agenda as you see fit. Anyone should be able to edit this agenda, so please feel free. This is just suggestions for what to talk about, but feel free to add your own. With that said, the first thing I had on the agenda was Memorial Day, in the US at least, is next Monday, and I'm not planning on being at the meeting. Is anyone going to be around and want to meet, or should we just cancel?
It's not a public holiday for me, so I can definitely be here, but I don't want to do a meeting by myself.
Yeah, it seems likely that be pretty lightly attended, so I'll plan on canceling. But if anyone does want to show up, by all means. Cool. All right, next up, let's run through the 050 milestone. We are just knocking down the last couple things. You can see that many of the issues we have open still already have PRs that will resolve them, which I'm excited about. Went through a lot of these issues with Nick last week. Was good to work with someone in person on this, and yeah, we knocked out a lot of these. Want to just highlight a couple that I think are straightforward. One, there's been some work on documenting path rewrites and redirects. This is by Travis. I added, well, both Nick and I added some feedback on this one, but Travis is out of office for a couple more days. But I think this one is going to get resolved hopefully this week. But that is, Travis did a great job with this PR. Feel free to add your own comments on this one, but I think it's in a really good place. Next up is, actually this one is just kind of the last thing in the list, so no changes on this front. The other one I wanted to highlight is something that came up in an issue that someone had raised about how it's confused. Our path modifier is confusing in that it requires a specific path match to be present, and if it isn't present, it's unclear what to do. So this just adds webhook validation to ensure that a prefix path match is always going to be present. So this is less of an issue. Again, this is just for an experimental feature in 050, but it feels better to have this in early than to not. So we agreed that this should be in the milestone. It's a very, very simple change. It's just 40 lines of code. But if anyone has time to review this, I just got this in just before the meeting, 12 minutes ago. But if anyone has time to review this one, I'd love to get this one knocked out. And then we're really in our final couple of PRs for 050. All right, with all that background, I want to get to what I think has been the most controversial of the bunch, and that's this wildcard hostname matching. There's been a lot of discussion on this issue. I feel like we've had longer term discussion, more history that has gotten lost here. But the fundamental thing is it's unclear what a wildcard hostname match should be interpreted as. So if you have star.example.com, should that match a.example.com or a.b.example.com? All of the above. With the ingress spec, it would only match a.example.com. I am thinking that is not the ideal spec, and is certainly not something that is broadly implementable. So my argument is that we should actually deviate from the spec that was in ingress and match what seems to be more broadly implemented, which is a wildcard hostname match is really just a suffix match, and it will match any level of subdomains, any number of DNS labels before that. There's more discussion here, but my biggest reason for this is that there are some implementations that simply cannot support matching only a single DNS label for a wildcard hostname match. And that includes GCP, but that also includes other cloud providers like Azure. And I couldn't get a clear answer on what AWS currently supports, but I know that there are other providers out there that just cannot support the single DNS label match here. So that I've been talking a lot here. I know others have commented on the issue. Anyone else have thoughts on this one?
I think I should indicate the history here. So yeah, I definitely wrote the spec originally to be that it was a single label and only a single label, the same as ingress. I think that to be honest, I would kind of prefer to have it be the same behavior as ingress unless we have a very good reason. However, mandating a behavior as core that cannot be implemented, that we know for sure cannot be implemented by all implementations, doesn't seem to fit well with how we're trying to do things in general. Like trying to make it to be to mean that core is implementable by everything, and if we have at least indications that some implementations can't do it, then that's a pretty strong thing in my mind that maybe this shouldn't be core. So maybe we shouldn't mandate that. So I think Rob, do you just want to can you just talk through like what your suggestion is about how to handle this?
Yeah, thank you. So I think there's so my personal preference here would be to go ahead and make the spec clear and make the spec that this will match any number of DNS labels. So it's really treating this as a suffix match. That is something like that, matches default behavior in Envoy, Nginx, and various cloud providers. With that said, it does deviate from the ingress spec. If we're uncomfortable with that for any reason, the alternative is to leave it unspecified. I would rather have it clearly specified, but if we just can't come to some kind of agreement, we could leave it unspecified. I'd rather have a clear specification here. And I think there's enough clear rationale towards defining this kind of suffix matching behavior here, just because it seems to be more widely implementable.
I think probably James did raise a good thing that multi-label matching doesn't work with TLS. And it will be hard to debug. As he said, so if we are going to allow it, maybe we need to allow, it's going to be a little woolly in how we allow it. And so I think, I personally think that leaving it unspecified is not an option. We have learned, the one thing that I would say we have learned from Ingress is that leaving things unspecified means that everyone's going to do something different and it won't be compatible between implementations. That is one of our goals. Let's not dilute that goal. We have to do something that all implementations can implement, and then it has to be fully spec'd, both with things in the spec and with conformance tests. That's the whole idea here. And so those are, in my mind, those are hard requirements. So whatever we do, we have to write it down and we have to have conformance tests.
Yeah, no, I agree. The thing I'd say about TLS is, I agree it's a messy and unfortunate thing, but it does match, if you're writing to Envoy, if you're configuring these other data planes, this is something that already exists, this kind of conflict of wildcard matching multiple labels, but that not working well with TLS. So maybe we should look at how these.
What happens? What happens in that case? Does it just drop to the default certificate? Does anyone know?
Well, it depends. Not all implementations support a default certificate, but yeah, essentially yes. Yeah, when you when you make a wildcard cert, like it will only match a single DNS label in the glob. So like, yeah, if you get star.foo.com in your cert, it will only match a single DNS
Right.
label.
I'm just saying, like, because you can bundle multiple wildcards together, and then also have a default. So it's not like the behavior is necessarily unknown for
Yeah.
for these most implementations I can think of.
So yeah, I
It's
guess
just that it's mismatched.
Yeah, I would say if we're going to do it, what we need to do is just call out to say, hey, remember that if you are planning to have 2 levels, like more than 1 level of wildcarding, then you need to make sure that if you're using wildcard certs, that they match, that they match the number of levels that you have. Yeah, so I think we can probably just have a caveat in the docs there to just be like, hey, maybe we can say, something like, implementations must the behavior is that they only have to support suffix matching, but you sort of may treat it as a single label, or not. Like, we recommend that in most cases, we recommend users use a single label in most cases. Like, don't do multi-labels unless you really need it.
What?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because you can conceivably put multiple wildcard certificates together to be served, and then that star makes sense, but it's probably not a very common use case.
Yeah, like, I mean, you'd have to put a wildcard certificate for star.foo.com and star.star.foo.com, right? Like,
yeah.
Or star.bar.foo.com and then star.zug.foo.com, and like each other subdomain you need to do or something like that. And so, like, that seems a bit weird, but I mean, all of this is like pretty edge casey. Just saying it's a suffix match. For users, we recommend that you only do a single label here, unless you have a very strong reason otherwise, or something like that. Like, we just need to preserve, in my mind, we need to preserve a little bit of the nuance around this discussion, just to say, hey, it can have other effects. Don't do it unless you really need to, something like that. How exactly we word that, I don't know, but that is my suggestion.
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. Before we go ahead with this kind of change, anyone else have any thoughts or comments on this? I'm going to take silence as consensus here. Any volunteers to go forward with making this change to the spec? I can probably find time, but if anyone wants to volunteer, by all means. Okay, I'll follow up with this. I think this is going to need some good review. We want to be very precise with this. Yeah, this is a tricky subject, but I appreciate the general idea of trying to make this as widely implementable as possible, and also trying to ensure that our API is clearly spec'd. So with those goals, I'll work on an update to the spec and similarly conformance tests. Cool. All right, Nick, I think that hands it back over to you. You had something about documentation.
Yeah, so I've been working with Meha to do like a documentation assessment of our website. It's mostly done. She's done a great job, and one of the things that came out of it was that one of her recommendations that I 100% agree with is that we need to have better versioning of our docs. It's only going to become more important as we go forward because of the way our versioning works. The bundle version is the key sort of dimension on which we need to version our documentation, because some fields are going to be experimental in a particular bundle version. Some fields will be stable. Some objects, maybe V1, Beta 1, objects are going to move around on a per release basis. So it's really important that we have something like you have on the main Kubernetes docs or other upstream repos where you have a drop down or something like that that lets you choose the bundle version of the documentation you're looking at. Now, for that to work, it doesn't work with the current documentation generation we've got, and also with the way that we do the versioning at the moment at all. It just doesn't work. So I sort of recommended her looking at moving the website to Hugo. And then after that's done, we can use, there's a few different Hugo plugins that you can use to add versions. She's going to have a look at them and evaluate them and all that sort of stuff. I just wanted to get, she sort of asked if we could get broad agreement that we're okay with doing the work to move the website to Hugo, firstly, and then doing the work to implement proper versioning. Now, the PRs to do this are going to be your usual, I've just re-implemented a website PRs, in that they're going to be unreviewable via diff pretty much, because you can touch every line in the website pretty much. So I think this one will just need it'll need a pass over it using the deploy preview, and that's really going to be all the review we're going to be able to do in general. Yeah, so I just wanted to get like broad agreement and make sure that everyone's cool with me getting Meha to have a look into that. Yeah, any questions or thoughts there? Does anyone disagree with any of that? Thanks, Mike.
+1.
Yeah, I'm so excited that she's been working on improving our docs. I'm complete agreement for this one. So looking forward to what she comes up with. And yeah, I've taken a quick look at what she's done as well, and yeah, it'll be great.
Yeah. So yeah, so just to 100% be clear, so Meha is a Linux Foundation summer or fall, one of the whatever your seasons was. I don't remember which one it was, but anyway, she's an intern essentially. So there's a mentor relationship with the Linux Foundation where people get paid. Maybe winter, I don't know. I lose track, but I'm like, is it your summer or my winter or your fall? Anyway. So I actually had a conversation with Nate, who runs the program at KubeCon, and we're going to rename the Linux Foundation mentorships to like the month that they start in, rather than calling them fall and stuff, so that we don't have to do this mental translation. Yeah, so that we've missed the next one, but I may look at doing something similar again, because it's really helpful to get more people involved, like more people who are just starting out involved, and get them up to speed on what's going on here. So yeah, so I will mark that as a +1. Tell her that it's recorded in these meetings that we're all good. I'll record that in the minutes. Yeah, I will mark that one's done. Thanks.
Awesome.
So Mike, you're up.
Hey, so this is mostly was curious to hear from other implementations about how they're looking at the recently merged change to switch the recommended status codes from 503s for a bunch of stuff to 404s. And kind of like what I stumbled across is that the 404s definitely seem to make sense for some cases where there's like a definitive gateway knows no such route exists. Where it feels more fuzzy is on some of the stuff where it's like there may be multiple backends and one is unavailable. those like, I think 404 is typically like a response that like might be cached or something like that, and doesn't really lend itself well to like retrying might succeed type cases. But was mostly just curious to hear from other implementations and other thoughts on some of this.
Yeah, I'll admit, I was like, I kind of feel more comfortable about this being 503 in general, this sort of stuff being 503, and that's why it was originally, I think. I lost a little context here over the last couple of weeks. Maybe something big happened that I can't remember. But yeah, so yeah, I'd probably be supportive of doing something like that, because as you say, like 503 does sort of imply a more retriable error. 404 implies a more permanent error. Yeah, I kind of agree a bit. Rob, maybe do you want to talk through?
Yeah, so as I recall, the idea here was that a 50x error code seemed to indicate that there was something wrong with the server, and the server in this case would be the application, not you know, Envoy or Contour. What it would be, the underlying application had some kind of issue, it was temporarily unavailable, which did not seem particularly accurate as a means of describing this is a reference to something that does not exist. If you think of a 404 as a reference to a file that does not exist, if you're just serving static content, as a rough idea, this seems at least somewhat similar to that, in the sense of this is a reference to a backend that does not exist, or I cannot resolve it. That was my logic here. The points about retriability are important, but I think to be clear, I don't think that a 404 or 503 perfectly represent this, and I can't find a status code that does. To me, 404 felt like a better representation of most of these error states. Yeah, interested in other thoughts here. I do get that neither feels particularly precise. And for anyone watching the recording, comment from Brian that Nginx returns 404 if backends are not present or fail health checks.
So I actually have to drop off early, but are there very specific ones that we're stuck on versus like the overall?
I think so.
Attempted routing to bad backend or something.
I think the one that Mike highlighted here is the specific thing where there are multiple backend refs. One resolves and the other does not, and so you're splitting between unhealthy or non-resolvable backend and a resolvable one. So you're 50% of the time you're getting a 404. Let's say you have a 50-50 traffic split, and when that traffic hits that unknown or unresolvable backend, you're going to get a 404. And that a 404 is something that, as Mike mentions, is not something you expect to see intermittently. You'd expect it to be.
What does unresolved mean?
Simplest case is it refers to a service that doesn't exist.
I see. And we said that is a 404 or is it 50?
We say that's a 404 right now.
Interesting. It seems like a 503. Maybe am I like?
Well, so we've gone back and forth on this. We've gone back and forth on this. There are some implementations like Nginx, right, that say if I can't find a backend for this, it's a 404, right? I think Don't we even do that?
I think, yeah, and so it's important to consider that the difference here is between there's a strong difference between zero healthy backends, and some healthy backends, but not all of them.
That is the trickiest part, and
Yeah.
not just for like what's correct, but also like potential implementation difficulties. So I'm kind of curious to hear from like what Nginx allows to be configured, for example, versus what Envoy allows to be configured. And and there is definitely like a large chunk of like 2/3 of it. 404 makes a lot of sense for like and I think telling folks that missed some of the original context, like in the context in which this came up was that the behavior for an unmatched route, when there's like no route match, HTTP route match, or all possible backends would have been eliminated by a filter, that was currently unspecified. So I think 404 makes a lot of sense for that.
Yeah, I think there's an important crossover here with inclusion as well. That if there's no valid, once you have inclusion, if there's no valid routes inside the inclusion, then does that mean that the whole route is not valid? Like what happens with the accepted and stuff there in those cases? And also, if you're including routes with including a route using the allowed routes that has a weight on the allowed routes, like, you know, you're saying 30% of routes goes to the included route, and there are no visible routes in there, what happens? If there are some routes in there, what happens? If there's like, you know, and so like, there's a lot of the fact we need to kind of get this close to right now, so that then it's easier to figure out what we need to do in the case of the more complicated stuff later. So yeah, I think that since Bowie, you're at least listening, if we could have someone else who's doesn't have the context, or any other people from the community who don't have the context, have a look at the state as it stands, and think about the cases that Mike has mentioned in there. I think that would be really helpful. I think that, like, I know I'm too close to this. I can't divorce my knowledge of the history and the context around it and stuff. It's hard to start from scratch. That's what we really need, is someone to review this starting from scratch. Like, okay, you know, what happens here, and to remember that you have to take into account that the difference between like no healthy backends and some healthy backends, and what it looks like for the user in those cases.
Yeah. This feels like it could probably use a table somewhere of all the possible cases and the, you know, ideal error code for each one. I'll say, like, this is something that is relatively easy for when I say us, I mean GCP to implement, because we deploy a static 404 error page that we can route to. So it's just, you know, like, this is a backend that we're routing to 50% of the time. So it's implementable by us. But that I recognize that's not everyone. And we also just want something that is not just implementable, but something that makes sense. You know, I think 404 makes sense for a large portion of the error cases here, but this is a weird one, you know, like, if we say that a 503 makes more sense when there is one healthy backend, but not, I don't know, maybe a table, maybe some kind of just a list of possible error states here. I don't know, Mike, it seems like you've already been doing some thinking about this.
I am happy to translate some of the stuff that I've already written on this into a table. And yeah, like, one of the big outstanding questions here is around like partial acceptance of routes too, of like, should there be a difference between 0 valid things and 1 valid thing on a thing that has multiple invalids?
Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
So sign me up. I can make a table.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Cool. All right. Yeah, thank you for raising this one. I remember seeing this come through my email and then I never found it again because it was lost in a closed issue somewhere. So yeah, thank you for raising it. I just want to head back to the 050 milestone for 1 second. If we get, so I'm thinking about this from the context of it being 2 weeks until we meet again. So with that in mind, I think it's possible by the time we meet next that this will have merged, this document redirects, rewrites, the webhook validation will have merged, and the wildcard hostname matching behavior will have been resolved. I think all of those things are likely going to be done. If we get to a point where all 3 of those have been resolved, do we feel comfortable cutting a release candidate of 050?
Yes.
Okay.
We should hear from other people, not just me, but there's a yes.
Yes. Anyone else? I'll take silence as a good sign here, but cool. So I would love to get a V050 release candidate out in the next couple weeks. That's my goal. And once we have that RC out, again, things can change, but I expect them to be very, very minor, and it provides a good release a good target for anyone who's working on supporting this release. My hope and goal is that anyone who supports V1 Alpha 2 today will support V1 Beta 1 the second it's released, just by definition. So you can say, hey, I support V1 Beta 1 without doing any actual additional work. So I think that'll be great news for everyone. But yeah. Okay, with that said, let's take a step into PR and issue triage. Anyone have any PRs or issues that we should highlight?
I'm waiting on review for the gRPC route implementation PR.
Yes. At this point, I've been so focused on 050, but I know it's basically doable. Like I think this is basically identical to the gap, so it should be just such an obvious thing to get in.
Right.
I think just trying to avoid expanding the scope of 050 right now.
Right.
But I know I've looked at it before and didn't have any significant issues with it. I don't know if anyone else has. But we've got, I think we have a couple big changes. Actually, why don't we make this a little clearer? So there's this one, and there's Jeff's gap on route inclusion. And I think in my head, I'd been considering these part of the 060 milestone. And so I hadn't really been touching them, but I open to other feedback on this. But for me, I'm just trying to get 050 out the door, and then we can talk about everything else.
Yeah, no worries. So does inclusion in 0.6.0 mean that we need to wait until like there's a branch cut or a tag done for 0.5.0 to merge it?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I'm hoping is very, very soon. Like if we get an RC out in a couple of weeks, I think that's going to be great news. And then we can start pulling other things in. But really the branch cuts once we get the tag out, like once we hit the release. We're not very good at having another release branch going before we get the first release out.
Right. Okay, no worries. Just wanted to bump it.
No. Thanks for the reminder on that. I think speaking for myself, it's something that I very much want to see in the API. I just trying as we can to get 050 out the door and then move on.
I understand having limited maintainer capacity.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the reminder on that one. Anything else that we should highlight here? I can go through these individually, but I just want to make sure that if there's one in specific that I've missed, we have time for it. Okay, so Steve, I don't think Steve is on this call. This one, oh, looks like Mike, you've already LGTM'd it. Okay, so side note, if anyone has been involved in this project and committing and PRing, feel free to ask for org membership. I know Nick and myself want to support people that have been contributing to the project. You know, don't feel like, you know, you can't be a member yet. I think in many cases, the people that have been contributing still don't have membership. That means they need the okay to test. They need their LGT. They can't LGTM. Where really, you know, I try not to call anyone out specifically, but there are lots of great contributors that don't have org membership yet that I'd be happy to sponsor. So, yeah.
So yeah, to remind everyone, the process is there's a place, you've just got to open a PR in one of the repos that will ask for your org membership, and then you need to get I think Rob and I plus oneing it actually will be enough.
Yeah, so it's yeah, just ping either Nick or myself on Slack, but essentially there's you open an issue in Kubernetes/org. There's a checklist that you need, and one of the key things is you need 2 people to plus one it from different companies that are owners are in owners files somewhere in Kubernetes org. And that includes Nick and myself and others. But yeah, so we very, very much want others to feel empowered here, to LGTM PRs, to not need, you know, I don't want it ever to feel like Nick and I or anyone else is just the, you know, a gatekeeper for this. Really, really want to share the responsibility, contributions, whatever. So
yeah, although gatekeeper the product is awesome. Other than that, gatekeepers in general are bad. So Rob, do you think I'm actually technically on a day off today, and I'm just dialing in because this is going to be like 1 or 3 meetings for 6 weeks. Do you think that you could just drop the link to the org repo into the meeting notes? And the other thing I want to say here is, I would encourage everybody, if you've come to this meeting and talked more than once, that's like you've contributed enough to be an org member, right? Like, you know, we don't want to keep the bar is not high to be an org member. Because the other thing we really, really desperately need is more maintainers. And the way that we get maintainers is by people being org members, being active, and doing PR review. And like the road to being a maintainer at this point is not long, right? Like we've got 4 or 5 maintainers or something like that, but like really, like Rob and I are sort of the primary maintainers at the moment, and I certainly would like to have some more people, spending some bandwidth on this. So if you are interested in becoming a maintainer, the path is very wide and very open, and step 1 is becoming an org member if you are not already. Yeah, that's a great summary, and that's one of the things I'd meant to add to the agenda today, but just we are very, very open to adding additional maintainers here. Want others to feel like they have ownership, and there have been some great contributors here. First step is getting org membership, but that path is wide open, and cool. So yeah, I'll drop a link in. I think I'll drop it in Slack as well, but I'll drop it in the meeting notes after, just so it's clear how anyone can join up. Yeah. Okay, so this one, I think Mike, you already LGTM this one. Yes, there were some confusing skips in here. I think that was the gist of this.
and indentation, right? Yeah. Okay.
Mine are clean up. Looks good.
Cool. Cool. I will add the official labels on that one, but yeah. That typo, this one's really straightforward as well. Steve added a, oh, that's cool. Yes, this is cool. Okay. You know that the tricks you can do with JSON path for status, very handy. Okay. What else? Anything else that's come in the past week? Request header modifier test. Yeah, I know I need to get to this one. And I've already reviewed this one. And everything below that, I think, is old enough. Nathan, I don't think you're on this call. I think this one may be blocked on me. Yes. Okay. So yeah, it looks like what we're seeing here is a lot of great PRs, and we just need more people that have some time to review them. So again, we want more org members, but org members also mean you have more capabilities to review and lgtm PRs, which also selfishly, I'd love to get more people active in reviewing. Even if you aren't an org member, like what I think it was Mike reviewed that other PR, that was great. Please feel free to add comments and review this, because like yeah, I think Nick alluded to earlier, I hate to be the bottleneck on this project. And so anyone else that has some time to review these things would be great. And you know, I just appreciate seeing all these fixes, all these additions come in. I think they're all net positive, and what I'm seeing here is nothing controversial. It just needs, you know, a round or two of review. Yeah, but with that, are any last things we should cover, or should we give our time back?
Could I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
If I was looking at doing an implementation that was L4 based, I looked at through some of the sample examples, some of the implementations. Any suggestions which one I should look at more closely? I looked at Nick's contour quite a lot, but there's a lot of stuff that's wrapped up in ingress controllers, and unpicking the gateway stuff is possible but challenging. So I'm trying to figure out where to start.
Contour is not a good example because we don't directly support any of the layer 4 objects.
Well, I know that none of them support L4, but I was thinking more of the control plane, the controller implementation. Then,
Right,
yeah.
right.
So I was just trying to think of where to start.
Right. So in terms of the actual code, I can't speak to anyone else, but for Contour, the things you want to look at are in the Contour. It's like in.
Well, I figured out where to contour you, and your design documents were really helpful. Thank you. So,
Awesome.
so
So, yeah,
that was good.
Yeah, I think the key parts just are how what framework you're using to talk to the API server, and then how you turn that into like whatever internal representation you're using.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part, is because the system of CRDs is relatively tricky. You've got to, if you're using controller runtime, you have to sort of reconcile. You have to have like a single reconciler that handles like all objects, because it's like they're interrelated. So yeah, that's how we've ended up coming to it there. I would actually say if you really need some detailed technical assistance, I'm going to army volunteer Steve Chris here. Just hit him up on the Kubernetes Slack and just ask him if he has any tips. He's the one who's done all the implementation. I could figure it out, but I'd have to go and look at it and remember it. Like, whereas he has been up to his eyebrows in this for like months now. So yeah. So and he's also working on the gateway. So yeah, he's going to be one of the people with the most context.
Okay, I'll use Slack then.
And
Thanks, guys.
yeah, and I'd echo that, and I'd also agree that maybe coming at this from a different angle, I'm excited to hear about an L4 implementation. I think, I could be wrong, I think Istio has supported some of the L4 stuff now. but the number of implementations that are supporting L4 is pretty tiny, at least that I'm aware of. And so I really want to hear about what that experience is like. Does it make sense? Are there features that you're looking for that the API doesn't support? You know, more implementations on the L4 side, I think, are going to help the API become more compelling at that level, because right now we just don't have a whole lot there. So really interested in your use case and, you know, what that could look like. So yeah, as you figure it out, definitely don't be surprised if parts of the API don't quite make sense, and please raise that to, you know, issue, discussion, Slack, wherever. Would love to hear more.
Yeah, we'll do. I'm just trying to carve out some time is the biggest thing to get started. So we all know how hard it is to carve time out.
Makes sense.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate the help.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's all for today then. Thanks everyone for good discussion, and we'll talk to everyone in a couple weeks. Talk to you later. Bye.